Good morning. My name is Mandy Chastain. This is my presentation for our Week 2 discussion. I sent a voiceover PowerPoint, I thought it was, and it didn't work. So I'm in my vehicle at my kids' practice trying to record this so that you guys can have it for today. Okay, so I'll begin. The book discusses how in a post-World War II society, engaging in effective intercultural communication is critical as we become more globally interdependent. Effective communication can be built by using the intercultural praxis model, which allows us to navigate complex and challenging intercultural situations. I'm going to use parts of the model to first define parts of my own cultural identity. Social categories of difference, such as race, class, gender, sexuality, and culture, are used to both exclude and include people from different groups and relationships. They were crafted to help us define the other and build the hierarchical system which promotes dominance and exploitation. Race is one of the categories often used for defining culture. For the purpose of this class, I'm going to include my race. However, typically, race isn't something that I usually use to define myself. As the book states, white people don't see whiteness, and it's not often that we talk about it or say I see myself as a white woman. However, in framing my identity, I'm a white middle-aged woman. In terms of socioeconomics, I would be considered part of the upper middle class. However, I was born into the lower working class, and I feel more comfortable and at home in and around working class people. However, I am learning to adapt to a more upper middle class environment. I don't know if I'm actually accepted as upper middle class, though. Some of the cultural values I hold are my family, education, independence, and work ethic. All of these frames impact how I see and act in the world. This chapter introduces the theory of intersectionality, which is an approach to understanding how socially constructed categories of difference operate in relationship to each other. These differences not only shape how we see ourselves, but also how the world sees and treats us. For example, as a child, I saw my grandfather as a white, working class man. However, as I grew older, I learned that was how he wanted to be seen, but not how he saw himself. As it turns out, my grandfather was 1/4 Native American. He never discussed this part of his race. No one could have guessed it by the way he looked, the clothes he wore, the trinkets in his home, the religion he practiced, the way he talked, the stories he told, and certainly not by the way he checked Caucasian on unofficial documents. He seemed to have completely rejected this part of his identity. My assumption, because he never talked about it, was that he did so because he did not want to be identified or treated as a minority. Growing up as a minority, he knew the social constructs around the label and how it would place him at a disadvantage his whole life. In an article by Cynthia Levine Rasky, she applies intersectionality theory to whiteness and middle classness. In this article, she explores in part the consequences for those with ambiguous ethnicity or white passing, and how social positioning can be both reinforcing and contradictory in their identity. While white passing does offer white privilege, it comes at a cost to one's cultural identity. By benefiting from the privileges of whiteness, it complicates and can distance one's ability to join with or relate to others in their own race as they attempt to address the oppression experienced by racist policies and social constructions. She states that it suppresses a collective experience that could be valuable in joining with others in their struggles for equity. The practice of white passing undermines society, it promotes racism, and challenges one's ability to maintain a cultural identity. In the reading from the PBS website for this week, the one titled Race, the Power of Illusion, it states that race is a powerful social idea that gives people different access to opportunities and resources. Our government and society have created advantages to being white. My grandfather witnessed this injustice firsthand and sacrificed his own identity to avoid the iniquity and domination he had once experienced and wanted to protect his family from. When my grandfather was of age, he moved away from Virginia and started over. He married a white woman, legally adopted her white children, and got a job in the steel mills that normally would not have gone to a minority. In Race, the Power of an Illusion, it states, "There is no cultural history to whiteness. We voluntarily gave it up in order to have privilege." This is essentially what my grandfather did in order to provide a more privileged life for himself and his new white family. He gave up part of his cultural history, his multiracial identity, and used the so-called power of whiteness to have access to more resources for him and his family. Institutional racism and discrimination have forced many, like my grandfather, to hide parts of their cultural identity. In my grandfather's case, he used his white passing features to hide his racial identity. However, in many cases today, we are learning more about individuals or social groups feeling that they must hide or distort parts of their identity, their sexuality, nationality, ethnicity, social class, even age, and specific abilities such as physical fitness or academic abilities, like with those who forge their children's academic scores in order to get them into the desired university. All are forging their identities in order to fit in and to avoid the barriers that are created by our social constructs. For our discussion this week, I think it would be interesting to take a look at how social constructs are impacting your identity or the identity of others or groups. All right, thank you.